You arrive at the lake, the morning mist is rising, the water is glassy, and what do? You look for the cleanest, most pristine patch of water to cast your expensive lure. And that is exactly why you are going home empty-handed. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about a fishing secret that goes against everything your grandfather taught you. We are talking about foam lines, those ugly, dirty streaks of bubbles and scum floating on the surface of the water. Most anglers see that mess and walk right past it, thinking it is pollution or dead water. But I am going to show you why ignoring that ugly foam is the biggest mistake you can make on the water. I guarantee that by the end of this video, you will realize you have been walking past a natural fish buffet your entire life. Are you brave enough to fish the dirty water, or do you prefer looking at a pretty lake while catching nothing? Let me know in the comments below, because we are about to change the way you fish forever. Before we dive into the strategy, we need to understand why this topic is so incredibly important for your success on the water. For generations, fishermen have been brainwashed by a very specific set of beliefs. We were taught to seek out clear water, visible structure, and beautiful weed lines. We were conditioned to believe that fish are pristine creatures that demand clean, highly oxygenated, crystal-clear pools to survive and hunt. Because of these deeply ingrained habits, millions of anglers do the exact same thing year after year. They pull up to a spot, avoid the floating debris, steer their boats away from the scum lines, and cast into the sterile open water. They fish memories and old wives' tales instead of reading the actual conditions right in front of them. Breaking these old habits is incredibly hard. It feels wrong to cast into a pile of dirty bubbles. But if you want to stop getting skunked and start catching the kind of fish that break lines and bend hooks, you have to understand the science of the water. You have to unlearn the myth of the clean water aesthetic. Picture this. You get to the lake just as the sun is coming up. The mist is still hanging over the water and everything is completely quiet. You stand on the bank, sipping your coffee, and you scan the water, looking for the perfect spot to cast. Out in the middle, you see a long, ugly streak of white and brown foam stretching across the surface. It looks like somebody dumped a bucket of soapy dishwater right into your favorite fishing hole. Your first instinct is to turn your back on it. You look for the crystal clear water. You want that perfect glassy surface that looks like a mirror. You cast your lure into the pristine water, sit back, and wait for the magic to happen. But the magic never comes. You sit there for 2 hours, watching your rod tip, and nothing moves. You start wondering if the fish are even awake yet. But here is the harsh reality that you need to hear. The fish are awake, and they are feeding aggressively. You are just casting in the completely wrong place. That ugly streak of foam that you ignored, that is exactly where you should have thrown your line. By walking past that dirty-looking water, you just walked past the biggest natural buffet in the entire lake. Let us talk about why we all instinctively hate that foamy water. When we were taught how to fish, most of us learned from our fathers or our grandfathers. They gave us rules that we still follow blindly today. One of those golden rules was to always look for clean, structured water. We were told that fish need clean water to breathe and hunt. When we see a giant line of scum, bubbles, leaves, and floating twigs, our human brains immediately associate it with pollution or stagnant, dead water. We think it is a sign that something is wrong with the lake or the river. You might even think it is chemical runoff from a nearby farm or soap from a drainage pipe. But in 99% of cases, that foam is completely natural. It is created by dissolved organic matter, like breaking down plants, mixing with wind and water currents. It is the lake doing its natural cycle. When currents collide, they whip these organic proteins into a froth, just like when you beat egg whites in a bowl. It is not toxic. It is not poison. It is the very foundation of the food chain. But because it looks ugly to our human eyes, we ignore it. We let our aesthetic preferences dictate our fishing strategy, and that is a mistake. So, why is this natural foam such an absolute magnet for fish? Think of that foam line as a giant, floating conveyor belt of free food. When wind and currents push across the main body of the lake, they sweep up everything on the surface. We are talking about dead insects, struggling beetles, ants that fell out of the trees, and newly hatched flies. All of this tiny, high-protein food gets pushed across the water until two opposing currents meet. When they crash into each other, the water pushes down, but the floating foam and the insects get trapped right there on the surface. They cannot escape. If you ever take a boat right up to a foam line and look closely, you will see exactly what I mean. It is an absolute graveyard of bugs. You will see flies stuck in the bubbles, spinning their wings in a panic. You will see floating seeds and bits of vegetation. To a fish, this is like walking into a free, all-you-can-eat buffet, where the food cannot run away. Why would a fish spend its energy chasing a fast-moving bait in the middle of clear water, when it can just sit under this foamy conveyor belt and open its mouth? The answer is simple. It would not. The fish are lazy and smart. Now, let us take this one step further down the food chain. We know the bugs are trapped in the foam, but game fish do not just eat bugs. They want bigger meals. This is where the magic really happens. All those struggling insects on the surface attract the next level of the food web. The baitfish, the minnows, the small bluegill, the shad. They all leave the safety of the shallow weeds and swim out to the foam line because they know the bugs are easy pickings. They school up by the hundreds right underneath the scum, picking off the insects that fall through the bubbles. It becomes an underwater frenzy that you cannot even see from the bank. You might be sitting in your folding chair, staring at a glassy patch of water, thinking the lake is completely dead today. Meanwhile, just 50 yards away, right under that foamy streak, there is a massive gathering of baitfish darting back and forth. They are feeding heavily, totally distracted by the feast above them. And whenever you have distracted baitfish schooling tightly together in one specific area, you are going to have company. The big predators are never far behind. You just have to know how to read the signs that the water is giving you. This brings us to the main event, the apex predators that you actually came to catch. The largemouth bass, the massive brown trout, the aggressive pike, or the hungry walleye. These fish are opportunistic hunters. They want the maximum amount of calories for the minimum amount of effort. When they realize that a foam line has concentrated the baitfish into one tiny predictable area, they move in and set up an ambush. But they do not just swim around aimlessly. They use the foam itself as a tactical advantage. That thick layer of scum acts like a dark roof over their heads. It blocks the harsh sunlight, creating a perfect shadow underneath. The big predators will hover right in the darkest part of that shadow, perfectly camouflaged, looking out into the clearer water below. When a minnow makes a wrong move while trying to eat a bug, the predator strikes with lightning speed and then disappears right back into the darkness of the foam. It is a brutally efficient hunting strategy. By ignoring the foam line, you are literally ignoring the exact spot where the biggest fish in the lake have set up their ambush. You are casting into the empty living room when all the fish are gathered in the kitchen. Let us take a moment to completely destroy this stubborn myth that clean water equals healthy, active fish. We have all been conditioned to love clear water. We buy polarized glasses just so we can look down into the crystal depths and spot the fish. We think that if we can see the bottom, we are in a good spot. But here is the frustrating truth about super clear water. If you can see the fish can see you, and they can see everything wrong with your presentation. Clear water is often incredibly tough to fish because the fish are heavily pressured, highly suspicious, and very easily spooked. They examine your lure, they see your fishing line, and they swim away. Dirty water, on the other hand, makes fish bold. The foam and the stained water underneath it give them a false sense of security. They cannot see as far, so they rely on vibration, sound, and quick reaction strikes to eat. When you drop a lure into the edge of a messy foam line, the fish does not have time to inspect it and see the treble hooks. It just sees a shadow invading its feeding zone, and it attacks out of pure instinct. Remember that the dirt is actually your best friend. It hides your mistakes perfectly. Imagine you are out on the boat with a buddy. It is mid-morning, and the bite has been completely dead for 3 hours. You have tried spinnerbaits, you have tried plastic worms, you have even thrown topwater frogs near the lily pads. Nothing. Your buddy starts talking about packing it up and heading home to mow the lawn. You are drifting across the main lake, and you cross over a huge winding line of foam that looks like a giant white snake stretching for half a mile. Your buddy actually turns the boat motor off so he does not suck any of that junk into the propeller. He grabs his rod and casts as far away from the foam as humanly possible, right into the deep, clear water. He works his lure back perfectly. No bite. Now it is your turn. Instead of following his lead, you pitch your lure right smack into the middle of the thickest, ugliest part of that foam. Your buddy laughs and tells you that you are going to pull up nothing but a clump of dead weeds. You ignore him. You let the bait sink just below the scum layer, and you give it one sharp twitch. Suddenly the water explodes. Your rod bends in half, the drag starts screaming, and a massive fish breaches the surface. There is another hidden scientific reason why foam lines are absolute magnets for big fish, and it has nothing to do with food. It has to do with water temperature. As fishermen, we know that fish are cold-blooded. Their entire metabolism is controlled by the temperature of the water around them. They are constantly looking for the perfect comfort zone. Foam lines do not just appear out of nowhere. As I mentioned earlier, they usually form where two different currents collide. Very often, these two currents have completely different temperatures. You might have a warm surface wind pushing across the lake, colliding with a cooler, deeper current pushing up from an underwater channel. The place where these two temperatures crash into each other is called a thermal seam, and it is almost always marked on the surface by a line of foam. By fishing the foam, you are actually fishing a massive temperature wall. Fish will sit right on the edge of this wall. If they are cold, they slide into the warmer side to speed up their digestion. If they are too hot, they slide into the cooler side to rest and catch their breath. The foam line is the literal thermostat of the lake, and the fish use it all day long. Let us talk about oxygen, especially when you are fishing in the brutal heat of the middle of the summer. We all know how tough summer fishing can be. The water gets incredibly warm, and warm water simply cannot hold as much dissolved oxygen as cold water. The fish become lethargic. They sit on the bottom, they refuse to eat, and they act like they are in a coma. You can drag the most expensive, realistic bait right past their nose, and they will not even blink. But foam lines offer a secret oasis in the middle of this underwater desert. Think about how the foam is created. It is the result of water tumbling, mixing, and crashing together, driven by the wind and the currents. All of that surface turbulence actually acts like a giant aerator in a fish tank. It mixes fresh oxygen from the air directly into the upper layer of the water column. The water directly underneath a heavy foam line is often significantly more oxygenated than the dead, stagnant water just a few yards away. When the big predators are suffocating in the shallow weeds, they will migrate out to the open water foam lines just so they can breathe easier. They go there to recover and eventually feed. Many anglers absolutely despise the wind. I hear it all the time. Guys get down to the lake, see the whitecaps rolling in, and they start groaning. They complain that they cannot cast accurately, they cannot keep their boat in one place, and they cannot feel a subtle bite. They usually pack up and try to find a tiny protected cove where the water is completely flat and calm. They spend the whole day fishing that dead, flat water, and they catch absolutely nothing. Here is what you need to understand about the wind. The wind is the engine that drives the entire foam line buffet. The wind is your best friend if you know how to use it. When the wind howls across a lake for a few hours, it takes all the loose organic matter, all the dead insects, and all the floating scum, and it pushes it relentlessly toward one side of the lake. It piles it all up into thick, frothy seams along the wind-blown shore or over underwater drop-offs. The fish know exactly what the wind does. They follow the wind because they know it is delivering their dinner on a silver platter. So the next time you face a windy day, do not hide from it. Embrace the chop and look for the foam lines. Survival in the wild is a daily game of life and death, even for the biggest fish in the lake. We often think of a 5-pound bass or a massive pike as the king of the jungle, but they are not the only predators out there. They have to constantly worry about threats from above. Eagles, osprey, herons, and even pelicans are always patrolling the skies, looking for a shadow moving near the surface of the water. If a fish swims out into the open, crystal-clear water to chase a meal, they are completely exposed. They become an easy target for a diving bird of prey. This constant fear makes them very hesitant to feed aggressively in the open sunshine. But a thick foam line changes the rules of the game entirely. That layer of bubbles and scum acts like a completely opaque roof. An osprey flying overhead cannot see through the foam. The fish know this instinctively. When they sit directly underneath a foam line, they feel totally secure. They know nothing can spot them from the sky. Because they feel safe, their guard goes down and their feeding aggression goes way up. They will happily chase a lure and smash a topwater bait because they are not worried about getting snatched out of the water. The foam line does not just hide the fish from the birds, it also hides you from the fish. This is a massive advantage that most anglers never even consider. When you are fishing clear, calm water, the fish can see everything you do. They can see the shadow of your boat rocking on the surface. They can see you waving your arms around on the bank. They can see the bright yellow braided line cutting through the water, and they can absolutely see the heavy metal snap swivel you tied to your lure. Any of these things can instantly spook a pressured fish and ruin your chances of getting a bite. But when you are casting into a messy, turbulent foam line, all of those worries disappear. The surface of the water is broken, hiding your movements on the bank. The water underneath is stained with stirred-up particles, hiding your thick fishing line. The noise of the colliding currents masks the splash of a clumsy cast. You do not have to be a perfect, stealthy ninja to fish a foam line. You can use heavier line so you do not break off when you hook a monster. You can use bigger, louder lures. The foam gives you a massive margin of error and takes all the pressure off you. So, how exactly do you fish this messy buffet? One of the most incredibly exciting ways to target a foam line is with topwater baits. I am talking about hollow body frogs, walking baits, or buzzing toads. Most people think topwater lures are only for the shallow lily pads or the shoreline grass. But throwing a frog right over the top of a deep water foam line is a secret weapon that tournament professionals use all the time. You cast your bait parallel to the seam so it lands right in the thickest part of the scum. As you slowly twitch it across the bubbles, it perfectly mimics a large, struggling insect or a dying frog that got swept up in the current. Because the predators are sitting in the dark shadow beneath the foam, looking up for exactly this kind of easy meal, the strikes are absolutely violent. You will just be watching your bait glide over the ugly brown bubbles, and suddenly the water will erupt like a bowling ball dropped from an airplane. A huge mouth will smash through the foam, inhaling your bait. It is the kind of heart-stopping, adrenaline-pumping strike that you will remember for the rest of your life. And it only happens if you embrace the dirty water. Topwater is fantastic, but sometimes the fish refuse to break the surface. Maybe the sun is a little too bright, or maybe the barometric pressure just dropped, making the fish a little sluggish. They are still sitting under the foam line, but they are holding a few feet deeper, waiting for the food to drift down to them. When this happens, you need to punch through the roof. You need a bait that will crash through the layer of scum and drop right onto their heads. A heavy jig with a weedless guard, or a Texas-rigged creature bait with a heavy bullet weight is absolutely perfect for this. You cast it right into the middle of the foam, let the heavy lead pull it through the mess, and watch your line on the fall. As that dark silhouette drops rapidly out of the bright foam into the darker water below, it triggers a pure reaction strike. The fish does not even have time to think about whether it is hungry or not. It just sees something fleeing the surface, and its predatory instincts take over. It will often inhale the jig before it even reaches the bottom. You have to watch your line carefully. If you see it twitch or suddenly stop sinking, set the hook immediately. For my fly fishing friends out there, the foam line is quite literally the holy grail of dry fly fishing. If you have ever fished a moving river for trout, you know exactly what I am talking about. River anglers call it a seam, and it is the exact same concept as a lake foam line. It is the line where fast water meets slow water, collecting all the hatching mayflies, caddis and stoneflies into a narrow little runway. The trout will sit in the slower water, barely expending any energy, and just tip their noses up to sip the bugs off the foam line as they drift past. It is an incredibly delicate and beautiful process to watch, but you have to be precise. If you cast your fly 2 feet to the left into the fast, clear water, the fish will ignore it. If you cast 2 feet to the right into the dead water, the fish will ignore it. You have to land your dry fly right on the edge of the bubbles. You want it to drift naturally with the rest of the trapped insects. When you get that perfect drift right down the edge of the foam, you will see a gentle swirl. The foam will part and your fly will disappear. It requires massive patience, but the reward is incredible. One of the biggest mistakes I see anglers make when they finally decide to try fishing the foam is that they fish it way too fast. They treat it like they are covering open water. They cast a crankbait or a spinner into the foam, put their head down and reel it back to the boat as fast as they can. Then they complain that the foam line does not work. You have to remember the psychology of the fish holding in this area. They are there because it is a buffet of trapped, dead or dying food. They are not in a chasing mood. They are in an ambush mood. If you burn a lure through the foam at 50 miles an hour, you are completely ruining the illusion. A dead bug does not swim at warp speed. When you bring your lure into the foam zone, you need to dramatically slow down your presentation. If you are using a soft plastic worm, drag it slowly. Let it sit in the strike zone for 5 or 10 seconds. Give it tiny, subtle twitches to make it look like a dying minnow struggling in the current. Give the fish time to locate the bait in the chaotic mess of the bubbles. When you slow down and treat the foam line like a concentrated feeding zone, your success will skyrocket. Let us be completely honest about one of the main reasons you avoid the foam line. It is not just because it looks ugly. It is because you are terrified of losing your expensive lures. You know that mixed in with all those bubbles and dead bugs, there are floating tree branches, thick mats of dead grass, and pieces of heavy debris. You look at that mess, and your brain tells you that if you cast in there, you are going to get snagged, snap your line, and lose a $10 bait. It is a valid fear. Fishing the foam is not clean, and it is not easy. You are going to pull up clumps of weeds. You might bury a hook into a floating log. You might even lose a lure or two. But fishing is not about staying safe. No risk means no reward. If you only fish the clean, snag-free water, you are only going to catch the small, aggressive fish that are foolish enough to wander into the open. The real monsters, the trophy fish that you brag about to your friends for years, they live in the nasty stuff. They want the structure. They want the mess. You have to accept that getting snagged is just part of the price of admission. Tie on a stronger leader and throw your bait into the danger zone. Believe it or not, Not all foam lines are created equal. If you really want to elevate your fishing game, you need to learn how to read the foam just like you read a topographic map. The color and the texture of the scum can tell you exactly what is happening beneath the surface. If you see a line of bright, pure white foam that looks light and airy, that means it is very fresh. It just formed a few hours ago when the wind picked up. It might have some fish under it, but it has not had enough time to collect a massive amount of food yet. But if you see a foam line that is stained brown, yellow, or even slightly green, that is the jackpot. That dirty, disgusting color means the foam has been baking in the sun and collecting organic matter for days. It is heavy, it is thick, and it is absolutely loaded with decaying insects, seeds, and trapped algae. It looks terrible to you, but to the fish, that dirty brown foam is a 5-star restaurant. It has an established food chain operating right underneath it. The bait fish have found it, and the predators have set up camp. Always look for the oldest, thickest, dirtiest foam you can find out there on the water. I will never forget a morning I spent fishing on a heavily pressured public lake. I was walking down the bank, and I came across an older gentleman sitting on a bucket. He had 3 rods out, perfectly cast into a beautiful clear cove. I asked him how the bite was, and he grumbled that the lake was completely dead. He told me he had been sitting there since dawn without a single nibble. Just 20 yards down the bank from him, a fierce wind was blowing a massive, disgusting slick of brown foam right up against the rocks. It was full of dead leaves and trash. The old-timer told me not to bother fishing there, saying the water was too dirty and I was just going to waste my time. I smiled, thanked him for the advice, and immediately tied on a heavy, dark-colored jig. I walked right up to the ugly brown scum and flipped my jig straight into the middle of it. The bait sank for about 2 seconds before my line went completely tight. I set the hook hard, and a gorgeous 6-pound largemouth bass erupted through the bubbles, splashing water all over the rocks. I landed the fish, looked back at the old-timer, and he was completely speechless. The proof is right there in the catch. That story perfectly illustrates the difference between an average angler and a highly successful one. Average anglers look for water that looks good to a human being. They want perfect scenery, clear water, and easy casting. Successful anglers look for water that looks good to a fish. They understand that nature is messy, chaotic, and often a little bit ugly. To consistently catch big fish, you have to completely change the way you look at a body of water. You have to stop looking for perfection and start looking for the flaws. The next time you back your boat down the ramp or walk down the trail to your favorite fishing spot, I want you to ignore the glassy, beautiful water. Scan the horizon. Look for the wind-blown points. Look for the current seams. Look for that ugly, floating line of bubbles and organic trash. Understand that you are not looking at pollution. You are looking at a living, breathing food web. You are looking at a conveyor belt of vulnerability. The bait is trapped, the predators are waiting in the shadows, and all you have to do is invite yourself to dinner. Break the old habits, throw your line into the mess, and get ready for the fight of your life. So, let us bring it all together. The biggest takeaway here is that fish do not care about a beautiful view. They care about survival, food, and comfort. The plot twist that catches so many anglers off guard is that the ugliest, dirtiest, most unappealing water on the surface is actually masking the most vibrant, active ecosystem underneath. That foam line is a conveyor belt of food, a temperature shield, an oxygen generator, and a protective roof, all rolled into one. By simply shifting your focus from the clean, sterile water to the messy, chaotic foam seams, you are instantly putting your bait in front of the most aggressive, hungry fish in the entire lake. It completely changes your approach because you stop fishing blind and start fishing the food chain. Thank you so much for watching. If this video changed the way you look at the water, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share it with a fishing buddy who always avoids the dirty water. Now I want to hear from you. What is the biggest fish you have ever pulled out of an ugly scum line? Or are you still too scared to get your lures dirty? Drop your stories in the comments below, and I will see you on the water.